Hey friends, it is Ask a Flower Farmer Wednesday. It's your friend Lisa Mason Ziegler, and Merry Christmas everybody. And so today, you know the way, right? See the little bubble at the bottom with the question mark in it? If you have a question you'd like for me to answer for you, just post it down there in the little bubble. It's good to see everybody. And so it's like December 15th, y'all. Is anybody else having like shock? I am so, of course, not ready for the holidays, but that's okay. So I wanted to show you some of our little Christmas presents that is some of our TGW swag that we're actually putting in our order boxes. Different items fit, whatever fits in the box is pretty much what we actually put in there. But I also wanted to say, remember that if you're one of our online course students of any of our online courses, please comment with the sunflower emoji. That IDs you to us as well as to everybody else, and students connect. We have some really great connections going on, so that'd be really awesome. So I wanted to show you what's back. Our little coasters. I think this was probably one of the most favorite things that we've actually put into our boxes with these little coasters. And so they're back. And we always try to keep our TGW pens, right? Which are, I mean, who doesn't need a new pen, right? And we also are still doing our Post-it, our little stack of Post-it notes. And while they last, because we're finally at the end, is my book, Farm Dog Babs, the Sweet Brown-Eyed Girl. If while we still have these, if you get a package that's big enough that they can put this in, we're actually putting this in as a little free gift to you. And so I don't know if any of you guys have actually gotten this book and looked at it. I mean, Babs was the sweetest dog ever. She was quite a character on our flower farm, from digging her own turnips, picking her own tomatoes, and just being the sweetest dog ever. She went to the farmer's market with me for years, and she literally had a longer line of people waiting to pet her than the line was to buy my flowers. It was really pretty amazing. So wow, it is negative 34 degrees up in Wanda's land in Alaska. Wow. So friends, remember, you can learn more about us. If you're new here and we've never met, please just go right on over to thegardenersworkshop.com. We have an online garden shop, which we only sell the things that I use, the tools, seeds, and supplies, and of course, and my books. I would love to sign a book for you. As well as a learning center. And the learning center is packed with videos, blogs, articles, podcasts. I mean, you could like fall in and never come out until way beyond the new year. And remember to to post your questions over in the little bubble with the question mark, because I'm going to start looking at those now. Let me put this swag down and let's see what questions we have. All right. H.H. Bloombar says, when using soil blocks on something like a cafeteria tray, what do you use for a humidity dome? So we've never really used a humidity dome. We never found it really necessary. And the person that I've learned how to soil block from, y'all, I'm having a really bad hair day, aren't it? My hair's sticking up in all kinds of places. The person I learned soil blocking from, who was Elliot Coleman, he really discouraged from using them just because it is too easy to encourage disease like funguses if you don't really keep a sharp eye on it. And me being me, I knew that I don't have a sharp eye. So we just never used one. And we had great germination in our environment. However, in recent years, because so many people struggle with keeping the surface of the soil blocks evenly moist, we began using wide weave burlap several years ago, because that eliminates the problem that Elliot saw with the domes. And that is, the burlap lays right on the surface of the soil blocks. It traps some of the moisture, but it still allows air to pass through it. So we don't use humidity domes. Domes. I can't even speak, y'all. So the burlap does the very same job without encouraging any fungus. Well, I mean, things that dampening off is really the number one problem that we saw reported with it, with using domes. So the thing to keep in mind, though, when you use the wide weave burlap is don't leave it on too long, because your seedlings, particularly snapdragons and stuff, will just pop right through those holes, and then you'll pull the seedling out when you pull that off, right? All right, let's see what other questions. Hunt country flowers. My fall direct sown foxgloves didn't make it. So, I'm not a really big fan of direct seeding anything that I can actually start indoors, because it is a challenge a lot of times. And foxglove was one of those. My first choice is always to start them indoors, and we really had really good luck doing that. And so the variety that I recommend growing that is in cool flowers is the variety called Foxy. Foxy does not need vernalization. It's not a biennial, so it doesn't need that long cold treatment, right? You can start Foxy or seeds now and plant them out in your garden in very early spring and still get blooms. However, you fall into those troubles that you get with early spring planting. The benefit of fall is they get established longer. They're better equipped to start blooming in spring. You won't have that with a very early spring, but you can test it and try it. But I would try the Foxy variety. That's a mix, and we don't actually sell that. We don't sell any digitalises anymore. They're just too highly poisonous to dogs and people. But it is seed that is readily available. But Foxy has freckles and is mixed colors, and it's a strong reseeder once you get it into your garden. Let's see what else we got here. Can I plant foxglove in early spring and get a bloom this year? So I just answered that. I didn't see you. This is the second part to your question. So if your 7B last frost second week of April, so you're like me. So that means that you need to get your foxgloves started in time to plant in mid-February. The most important step is to get your planting area ready now before it gets too wet, covered in snow, or frozen. So yes, you can do that, Hunt country flowers. Juby flowers. My fall sown snapdragons are starting to bloom. I've had a warm fall 7B. Is that normal? Well, I don't think we have anything that's normal any longer. And I know that there are a lot of people experiencing this. We talked back, I talked a lot back in September probably and in August about how with each passing year, as our falls are getting longer and longer, we are pushing our planting dates deeper into winter, meaning the 6 to 8 weeks. If you're in an area where winter shows up like it always has, that still works great. But for some of us, I'm now planting my cool flowers weeks after that because of the long growing period that encourages them to extend and start blooming. So first off, to address your problem that you're having now, if winter still has not started for you, if it's still warmish outside, I would just let it go. Leave them alone. Wait until the temperatures drop before you pinch it to go through winter. Because if you pinch it now while it's still warm, guess what's going to happen? More little stems are going to sprout. You're going to be pinching again. So I say just let it go until winter really starts. Then you can pinch off those tall stems if you need to. And that hopefully the plant's kind of going into dormancy, and then it'll just sit there and wait for spring. But a lot of people, and if I'd have planted our cool flowers at the right time, we'd be having a lot of blooming going on, but we just planted later. The thing is, you can plant transplants later, but you don't want to be planting your direct seeded stuff later because you need that to have the warmth of the day to get that sprouting going. Cultivating the heart. Remind me Remind me, do you use the black film to plant seedlings into it in very early spring? So, right. So we use the Bio 360 biodegradable film. It's made out of a corn byproduct. It looks like plastic, but it works. It looks and works like plastic, but in fact, it's a biodegradable film. It's black on one side and white on the other. When we're making our beds for transplants, we put the black side up for fall planting and for very early spring planting, and even sometimes that first spring planting. We swap to making beds with the white side up when the daytime temperatures, when you're planting, are going to be above 80 to 85 degrees, because what happens is the reason there's two colors is the surface of that film is 20 degrees cooler when the white side is up, which is what you want to do in the heat of summer, right? But in very early spring and fall plantings, the black side being up means that the sun is heating that soil just a smidgen more than if it wasn't there. So it really benefits very early spring plantings and fall. So if you're saying early spring, like in before your frost date, for sure use the black side up. Some years, our very first spring planting, those first warm season tender annuals, it really depends on what the temperatures are doing. If I'm pushing the envelope, meaning I'm risking it, and the nighttime temperatures are still kind of cold or cool, and the daytime just isn't warm enough yet, but I'm going to plant warm season stuff anyway, that is when I definitely put the black side up and use hoop and row covers. So there's a lot of ways you can manipulate the biodegradable film as well as using hoops and row covers. Shortstop Flower Company, they're in Zone 3. If I start my cool flowers in January, could I put the starts out in April? Would they die? So, Shortstop Flower Company, I know that you're in Zone 3, but what it really is based on when you actually plant is based on the actual frost dates. So if you're planting 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost, cool flowers should in fact survive in your environment. They're not gonna do a lot of growing if you instantly get a lot of snow load right away. But you can't plant most things in the fall because they won't survive your long winters and your long snow load. So you can plant cool flowers 6 to 8 weeks before your last historical spring frost. All right, let's see here. Hunt Country Farms. Johnny says sow cool season seeds 6 to 8 weeks before last frost. Can I spring sow and plant cool flowers earlier than last frost because they like to be cool cold? All right, I'm going to read that again. I don't understand. Johnny says to sow cool season seeds 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. So this two-part question, I guess, but so Johnny's, what you're saying is their instructions say that you can direct seed out in the garden 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost. And I think that is in fact true. I just don't think a lot of germination starts happening until it actually heats up, and that's weeks later. So, but you can definitely put the seeds out in the garden. Can I spring sow and plant cool season earlier than last frost because they like to be cool cold? So I think I understand your question. You're asking, can you do it earlier than that? So the difference between fall planting and very early spring planting would be what I call winter planting. And if a cool season hardy annual is winter hardy in your zone, and you can fall plant it, you could also winter plant it if you have the area prepared. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. That was pretty complicated. I'm sorry. Let's see. Megan. My soil has almost no nitrogen and phosphorus. I'm doing a weekly Neptune's Harvest foliar feed. Should I consider twice weekly in the spring to make up for the intense lack? And she's in Texas 8A. I don't think you need to be fixing that with liquid fertilizer. You need to, my recommendation would be to contact whoever the farm supply is in your neck of the woods. Most likely you're going to have something shipped in, and ask them what dry product, whether it's a general, there may be a general, you said nitrogen and phosphorus, whether a general purpose organic fertilizer would help to correct that, or if there's another specific product. And when I say product, I mean there are so many different organic products. She's back there. Oh, the UPS man is waving to me through the window. So I would connect with your farm supply store. That is a place that sells, big bags of fertilizer and every other kind of component that you can work with that. I do not think that if you're actually lacking, that you're going to fix that using soil drenches with Neptune's Harvest. You need a much bigger picture. And if you got a soil test obviously done, right, then I would connect with whoever did your soil test to ask for their advice. If that's an extension office or if that's a private company, that is part of what your soil test services are. They'll help you figure out what to do and how much to add. But your farm supply store can also do that for you. Nitwit says, no, my direct seeded cornflowers and dill are very thick and very tall. Should I thin them now or wait until spring? So you're in 7B. So just so you know that dill can really be on the edge for 7B. You're right on the edge of where it is winter hardy. So if you lose your dill, I would plan on planting it again in very early spring because it's so well worth it to have it. But we wait until very early spring to thin any of our direct seeded stuff. What that means is, so very early spring for me is mid-February. That's about the same. That's when we plant our second round of cool flowers. But when we're doing that, part of the chores that we're doing at that time, if our afternoons are warming up, a lot of times we'll pull our row covers down if they have row covers and start doing hand weeding and thinning. But we wait until they just start a little bit of growth activity. And they do really, really well that way. So I do not thin in the fall or during winter. All right, I'm really worried about Apex Acres. I'm really worried about my fall planted cool flowers. I'm in northern Indiana, zone 5B, and it's in the 60s for several days. Most worried about Nigella and bachelor buttons. They look so full and bushy. So what you're worried about is that they're getting bigger and bigger. There is really not a thing in the world you can do about that. So I don't know if you have them under row covers, I would for sure uncover them and even let them go. Until it started dropping below 30, I would not have any row covers up. Then if you are using row covers for 5B, I'm not so sure that is corn cockle and Nigella actually winter hardy in your zone. So I would definitely be putting row covers up once the cool weather, once your winter really starts to set in. But there is not a thing in the world that you can do about plants getting too big. There's just not that I know. When should I sow strawflowers and when should I plant out last? And when should I plant out? Last frost, second week of. So very early spring is when I plant strawflowers. Strawflowers are only winter hardy to zone 8. And I'm right on the edge of that, and we just don't find it necessary to fall plant them because they grow enormously, even when we plant them in very early spring. So you're going to plant strawflower transplants 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost. That means you need to have transplants ready to be planted. So you're just like me. So you're looking at mid-February to early March, and you need to have transplants ready then to go out in the garden, and they do just absolutely fabulous. All right. Frost cover for wind. Winter Cottage Studios is asking, do you cover and uncover as the days fluctuate into the 40s and 50s? So here is my kind of rule that I follow for row covers. When we plant cool flowers, we put the hoops and the weight bags are put out in the garden, and the row covers are laid down on the side. Ready to go is what that's saying to you. So I can either put them up when a windstorm is coming. If the windstorm is super severe, obviously row covers aren't even going to help. But I'm in a really windy site, and we'll have 20 to 25 mile constant flow across our garden, sometimes for a couple of days at a time. Row covers are priceless in that situation. If you sit and watch the row covers get flapping constantly and think about your plants having to take that wind, you'll quickly understand why it's so beneficial to have row covers for every bed in your garden, even if you're not using them for winter. So that's the first time that I use them. That typically means they're put up and then taken back down after the windstorm is over. I don't put row covers up for winter protection. First, I should preface this by saying two things. I only fall plant what is winter hardy in my zone. I don't try to do any heroic stuff and get something that doesn't normally survive my winters to survive in my garden. I got over trying to do that long ago. There's way too much that does survive that I don't have to be risky business with. And the other thing is, you have to know that whenever a snow storm or an ice storm is forecasted to come, you always take your row covers down, because these little tunnels are not made for that. They will collapse and suffocate what's underneath of them. Now, snow and ice storm alone actually will protect your plants. They will coat and encase your plants and protect them. But if you put a cloth underneath all of that, it will smash and suffocate your plants. So my rule of thumb is, I will put my row covers up when it goes kind of into the mid-20s, and put them up, and we'll leave them unless the daytime temperatures start climbing above 55 degrees, and it's going to be doing that for several days. So you put them up when the reason I use mid-20s, because of course I don't have to protect my cool flowers from low temperatures because they're winter hardy, but why not give that protection? It protects the foliage, and it just has a lot of benefits to putting them up. When we start hitting the mid-20s at night times, usually that means that our daytime temperatures are staying pretty cool too, so I can put them up and leave them. But if we hit a pocket of warm days where it's going to be climbing back up into the mid-50s or more, I definitely take my covers down to keep my cool flowers from getting too warm and growing. I don't want to encourage those boogers to start growing again until it's early spring, right? So I will tell you that back when I was first, when I first started growing cool flowers 25 years ago, and up until about maybe 10 years ago, I put our row covers up at Thanksgiving, basically, and it stayed cold all winter. And they were up all the time. That is not the case now. They basically have to be tended to. So you have to keep your eye on the weather. Hunt Country Flowers is asking, if it's windy but warm, should I take the row covers down? So what you're trying to prevent is from the flowers getting really heated up under that row cover. And if it's windy, what I have been known to do is to move the weight bags off of the side, the opposite side of where the wind's coming from, so that side will flap. The wind's coming from this way. If I take that, and that just means it's not trapping any heat. But I think it would probably be all right to leave it intact, unless it really gets hot. House of Bub, do you net your beds when you amend your beds in the fall or when things start to warm up in spring? That's a great question. So our beds do not get netted until very early spring. So we make our beds, we plant our beds, we put out the row cover equipment, and put them up and down all winter long. In very early spring, typically for us, that's early March, after our very early spring cool flower plantings are done, which typically, we're planting a couple of beds we'll have Lysianthus and Strawflowers and stock and and another round of Sweet William and some other miscellaneous things. After those plantings are done, then we start, okay, let's take some row covers off and start doing a little bit of whole weeding. Let's check out and start thinning. So you want to do those jobs before stuff really gets rolling in spring. Then the next step is to net. The benefit, y'all, of doing things in this manner is, just think back when we were in high production and we had 40 beds that were 120 feet long. It takes time. I don't care, even with 5 or 6 employees, it takes time to get all of these steps done. So you always want to start your chores at the very earliest that you can successfully, because everything you have to do takes a lot of time. Whether you have a lot of plantings or you're new to this and you're not very fast or efficient yet. So we want to have all of our chores done in very early spring so we can get our netting on before those plants start elongating. So we net in the spring, or I guess I would call it the very early spring. I think. So the Dairy Barn Flower Farm. How do you figure out when fall planted cool flowers will bloom? I'm guessing the days to bloom on the seed packets don't quite work. No, you're in fact very, very right. And the way that all works out literally depends on where you are in your frost stage, right? So I know now when mine typically bloom, because for doing this for all these years, and there really is no formula that I can tell you. Well, I will say to you that, for instance, for snapdragons, there's different classes of snapdragons, and literally, they have different numbers, and then they also, some of them are called greenhouse snaps. Well, we grow them all out in the field, obviously, right? But it's all about day length, and for us, I can tell you that Chantilly snaps are the first ones to bloom because they are more short days. They will elongate and begin to set bud even in short days. So it's Chantilly, and then I think it's Madam Butterfly and Opus, and then Rocket. And then we also grow one called Snappy Tongue that's kind of a ruffled edge. It's not really a Madam Butterfly. It's a little bit different than that. That is the very last one. So I really recommend that you kind of figure that out based your first year. Definitely notate that on your big calendar that I recommend everybody have. For instance, for the first things to plant, to grow, to bloom on our farm are bachelor buttons and Iceland poppies. They typically, for us here in Zone 7, mid-April, last frost, oftentimes are blooming the end of March, even before our last frost date. So you learn these things, but in reality, the end of April and May is when our farm really gets up and rolling. And you just have to kind of make those notes and live by, because there is no days to bloom that really works out, because your frost dates really, really are a key part of that. Can you give us an idea when you start tilling under your cool flowers and transforming into tender annuals, just trying to plan as a newbie? So first off, you need my book, Vegetables Love Flowers, which is really a 3-season cutting garden book, right, y'all? It's very misleading, I know, by that title. It really is about how flowers benefit a vegetable garden, right? And the way that you can benefit your vegetable garden is by planting this 3-season cutting garden right in the midst of your veggies. So it really embraces the whole succession planting. Thank you, Rhonda. And she just brought this to me. This book has diagrams in the back of it showing the example of the evolution of what actually happens. So each one of these pages, this is like spring, what does it start in? Spring, summer, fall, and winter. So it kind of helps you to wrap your head around what succession could look at. But in a nutshell, Nessie, is that we break our garden. It doesn't matter if you have a teeny garden, a medium garden, or a 1 acre garden, or a huge farm. The same application applies. We break our planting space up into whether it's a third or quarters. Cool flowers are planted, let's just say a third, for easy figuring, for my 1 acre. I say a third of that acre is going to be in cool flowers. A third of that acre is going to be my first warm season tender annual planting. And the third, it will be our second warm season tender annual planting. And then so my cool flowers are up and blooming in spring. We're planting the second over here, the second block with those first warm season things. We're starting indoors the plants for that third spot. Guess what? By the time you get to that third spot, that's when my cool flowers are starting to, some of them are already over, some of them are starting to peter out, and that's where our third rotation of warm season tender annuals will go. It can really be a whole lot simpler than what most people tend to make it. So Vegetables Love Flowers can really help you out with that. And again, it also depends. Some of the cool flowers are a one and done for us. Like for us, Agrostemma, Corncockle, Bells of Ireland, Nigella. But that's because I live in the South. Somebody in New England, those flowers can go on much longer. So it's really hard for me to tell you which ones those are. You just kind of have to make the provision about what I just shared with you, because that allows you to let your cool flowers go as long as they need to go to get your first warm season tender annual planting in on time and to have plenty of space, and figure out what's a one and done for you and then go from there. All right, y'all, it's after 12 o'clock, and I'm going to answer this one last question and then we're going to be done. Did you ever have a year your peonies did not bloom? Yes. Do you provide peonies any extra care for great blooms? So I posted today a picture of Bobo standing next to our peony patch. I think that was like 3 years ago. And actually the year after that picture, we had a late snap frost. We actually got down to below 20s during April when the buds were of a reasonable size, and it took all of them. I mean, we didn't get one peony bud. That had never, ever happened before. So that can happen for sure. And we don't really do a lot for our peonies, is what I kind of say in the post today on Instagram. I mean, we don't really deliberately fertilize them. I have fertilized them from time to time, but and it was literally, when they get fertilized, is when we have some left over in a bag that's not going to be used somewhere else. But what we do is put down compost every year or leaf mold on them and mulch them. And that doesn't happen every year, but it happens most years. And our peonies are like decades old. That's why we have such amazing production out of them. I'm sorry, I'm just reading. All right, so that's pretty much all that I really do for our peonies. So friends, our time has ended, but remember, I'm over on Clubhouse at 1 o'clock. If you don't know what Clubhouse is, it's just another phone app. It's available for Android and iPhones. You just have to download the phone app. Meet me at 1 o'clock over there. It's kind of like a live podcast, basically. And today I'm talking about row covers, and all the different uses and kind of how I use them. So join me over there, and you can either come up and talk to me live like we're on a phone call together and ask a question, or you can send it through the back channel to Jessie, and we'll be talking about all things row covers, and I hope to see you there. And if not, I'll see you next week here on Instagram. And also, my Facebook Lives are now on Thursdays at 11 a.m. so we can be outside in the garden, and I do that from the farm. So friends, I would love to send you one of my books, and would autograph it for you. So till we meet again, friends, ciao.